Dr. Jason Bekta, and this is Out of the Basement, a podcast exploring radiation medicine and things that don't generate grant funding or tenure. I'm board certified in radiation oncology and have a PhD in molecular radiobiology. And though I am a doctor, I'm not your doctor, and none of this content should be considered medical advice. All right, for our intro episode here, we have Matt Spraker of WashU and now Colorado fame, well, I guess Twitter and accelerators fame, joins me to talk about our respective jobs and our understanding of things like contracts and RVUs and workload, and really just kind of talking about things as we understand them from our experiences, and hopefully other people will find them helpful as well in their job search, either their first job search or considering switching from one type of environment to another. So hopefully this is helpful to somebody, at least one person for at least one thing, maybe not, but we're going to try anyway. So let's join in on a conversation Matt and I recorded a couple of weeks ago.
What makes the job market complicated is like people don't realize that, like, you know, the impact of a small field on like your day-to-day job search life, because you end up taking these like weird compromises because jobs come when they come, right? So basically we I can just say that I was like not super happy at the end of 2020, and I was starting to consider looking, and then right around that time, my friend at work left and took a new job, and she was the medical director role that I took over, and it was a little bit of a shift for me because it gave me an opportunity to focus on community engagement and kind of building services, which is sort of what I wanted to do. So I got really excited and like invigorated about work again, and took that on. And right around that time, we're like, all right, we're staying, let's buy. And we looked around, and the St. Louis market's really weird in that there's not a lot of like, we didn't want to buy like a starter home. We wanted to buy kind of like a nicer house, but the choices are like live far away from the city in a big, really big house that's kind of like ridiculous for two people and has weird things like a septic tank because it's like way out, like outside the city, like kind of St. Louis is not as developed as like Chicago is.
Right.
Or it was the point where the hot neighborhoods, if you wanted to buy like a nice house in the hot neighborhood, it was like, you know, $1.5 million. So it was like out of our price range. So we got super lucky that there was like this really nice lot in Brentwood, which is like a, you know, like a nice neighborhood in the city that has like good schools and stuff. And we jumped on it, but it was a new build where like when we put the deposit down, like they were going to knock the house down like the next week. So the blueprint was done, but we like did everything else, and it took it was supposed to take like a year. So they told us like at the latest we'd be in it by the end of 21. And when the end of 21 came up, it took like 3 more months. So we were renting a house, and it ended in that summer of 21. And when we moved here, we were like done with apartments forever. We lived in apartments for like 10 years straight, and we like couldn't stand living by people anymore. And we went back into apartment, and we like compromised because we figured it was like temporary. And we ended up being in that apartment for like 9 months. And it was just really, really tough. And then we moved in. So we moved in March, like literally like, you know, 3.5 months ago. And then we turned around and told our realtor that we're leaving. So it was kind of,
wow.
It was kind of crazy. Yeah. And in this current job, it came up so abruptly and fast. It was just, basically I just made the decision that I wanted to look again. Probably a whole nother show about like why that is. And then, and basically I was connected with, you know, my new boss, and I did like an initial like meet and greet Zoom thing, and it seemed like a perfect fit right away. So I went out there hoping, you know, like looking for reasons to like not take it and stay. And it really, like, you know, I mean, I think it is going to be like a really good fit. So we just jumped on it, and we figured we'll just have to deal with whatever comes with that. So
that's a brutal story. It obviously has a happy ending in a way, but as someone who just did kind of the house thing, I feel that, well, So for you, because you didn't do the integrated MD PhD, how many times did you move when you were still in training?
Yeah. And I should just say explicitly so we don't like get canceled that that like I feel very lucky because this could be horrible, but the reality is that it's like an inconvenience that we can just like, like we have the funds and everything to like manage all of this, and we'll just like it'll end up working out, and if this was right after residency, there's just no way. I mean, it's crazy how expensive everything is now. So I did a PhD first, and then I did med school and then intern year, all in Chicago, all at UIC. And we moved. We actually moved a lot, but all like within Chicago. So we moved, and we moved twice during PhD. I moved home for the beginning. We moved in with my in-laws basically for the beginning of med school, which was an interesting time, and then back to the city for clinicals, and then we moved back to the in-laws for intern year. So we moved.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, but we were like, these were all like 1-bedroom apartments, so it wasn't like, like the moving was like relatively easy. It wasn't like a crazy move.
But that's no, you give me a good idea on that, because I mostly follow RadOnc Twitter, but I do branch out and follow other people, and that's been kind of a conversation, and that was my experience as well of just the trying to move while in med school and residency, and then move right after when you don't really have money, in general, was incredibly difficult. And I mean, I basically rode credit card debt for all of residency from just like interviewing and moving and stuff. And kind of the logistics of doing that is, I guess isn't really talked about as much as I thought, but I do see that conversation kind of happening in certain spaces on Twitter. So maybe that would be a good thing to eventually talk about.
Do you follow that financial guy that's like kind of, I don't know how new he is, but I feel like
I think Tyler Olson, is that?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's new or if it's new to me, but
if it's who I'm thinking of, I think I feel like I've been noticing that particular person for at least a year or two. I feel like
it is. It's Olson Planner.
Yeah.
Oh wow, he's got 19,000 followers. I didn't realize that. He's I don't know if there's other people doing this, but like it's pretty smart, man. He just like came on Med Twitter and was like, hey, I'm a financial advisor.
I thought the same thing, because I don't know about you, but I get bombarded all the time on LinkedIn with like financial advisors, and he took a novel tactic, or at least I haven't seen someone else in that space, whereas on my LinkedIn is just littered with financial advisors trying to get me to talk to them.
Oh, you know what's crazy too is I saw like he actually gave me advice. He doesn't know it, but I saw a conversation he was having about umbrella coverage. Do you have umbrella coverage?
Wow. I honestly forget at this point.
We should.
That's a whole other thing. I don't remember. I haven't looked at that, and like you're making my brain hurt. I haven't thought about that since the end of residency.
Well, we probably shouldn't make this like a financial show, but we have an advisor, like sort of. It's just my wife and I, and we like don't. Like I think your life gets more complicated if you have kids and things like that. Like we just, so I don't have a lot of things. But I basically saw that, and I wrote an email to my financial person. I was like, should I have umbrella coverage? And she was like, yeah.
That's
so he sold me coverage indirectly, basically.
And he didn't. I live my life like that. That's what Twitter is for. I just tried, one of the partners, I was trying to convince him that the other day. I'm like, people who aren't on it don't understand kind of, if you follow the right people and things on Twitter, it's just like incredibly helpful professionally. Like I don't think I follow a single non-medical person on Twitter. And so my Twitter looks probably very different than a lot of people, but med Twitter is very powerful.
Yeah, no, it's super important. I don't know if you ever waded into non-medical Twitter. It is an absolute dumpster fire.
I've tried to. Like sometimes Twitter will suggest me things, and I don't understand it. I don't get how people talk about things. Like med Twitter makes sense to me. Like even if it's not RadOnc, med Twitter makes sense. But other stuff does not.
There's some good people. There's some really good follows too. I really like that that urologist woman,
Ashley Winter.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Me too. Actually, it's funny. I'm thinking about trying to work in vaginal estrogen now, just because it's a big part of my Twitter right now. And that I get a couple endometrial patients on Beam, so that's a great idea. I'll add that to a similar suggestion about nicotinamide for skin cancer. But that's all. Look, we just spawned 30 new episodes from that. Well, I mean, so I guess I'm very interested in kind of with exactly what you just said. But also, how much contact do you have with the residents in your current job in terms of their job search stuff?
A lot actually.
So you're probably even more. Even though I just went through it as the transition, you're probably even closer to it than I am, secondhand.
You mean like talking to the residents and things?
Yeah, because I mean,
Yeah.
so I think I realize for this time of year and the people I've been talking to, it's that there is no formal training in med school, at least in the places I've been. There was no formal training in, what a contract is beyond very vague terms, but how we get paid and what is a good contract and a bad contract and things. And so I don't know if you've been, I guess kind of, and for you specifically, how your current or your new job differs from your old job in terms of what your contracts looks like in very obviously general terms, not violating any NDAs or anything. But
no, it's what's so it's funny because I'm actually not, so I do interact with them, but it's interesting because I'm probably too junior to like really help a ton. Because I'm not, like at WashU, like some of the people are like super connected to like everyone in the country. So it's, they don't come to me to help like, start things, but I tried to interact with them a little more. And I felt very strongly this year because of, my job change. And I wanted to like, meet with them and kind of talk about I felt like my view of the market and what I was looking for, like kind of changed, and I had a better understanding of it this time around. So like, I wanted to try to like share that with them. So I just did this like session, and to me, it felt like it was like really disorganized and rambling and not that helpful, but they seemed to really like it. And we just talked about how different jobs are structured. But in a more general sense, like what does it really mean when you're academic, if you're a physician scientist, if you're clinical track, or if you're like a satellite? And to the best of my knowledge, I know there's probably even more models out there than I haven't seen. How is private different? I asked them, I was like, what would you call my job, my new job, which is, a private company that's like a quote faith-based nonprofit that has like trial academic interests. What do you call that? Right. It's like, who knows?
It's privatemics, man. Privatemics.
Right. Yeah. And so my message to them was about like trying to get a lot more specific about what you're looking for. And then going for that. And I think that's a good, like, it's sort of like what you're asking, right? Is like how the differences in what they're structured, like, how does that affect?
Yeah. Cause I guess, so from a general standpoint, so I had kind of mentally separated jobs into three main buckets. So one is academic, and then, kind of all the subdivisions from there. Two is, well, I guess it's two. So two is private, but within private, it's like hospital employed or true private practice, like physician owned PLLC sort of groups.
Right.
And so, yeah, you can branch off from there. So I guess your
including that last group would be like a multi-specialty physician group, right?
That's anything where you're not technically, well, because in the wider world, it's are you a W-2 or are you a 1099 employee? So because so for me right now, I'm part of a true physician-owned single specialty private practice. I'm an associate, so I am technically a W-2 employee, but the group operates on a pro fee contract, which we can talk about. But I guess in your current job, in your academic job, like kind of what were you hired as? Did it mutate at all? How is it structured? Can you just kind of tell me about that?
Oh yeah. Because it's pretty, like, it's not going to be like surprising, I think. So basically, I was hired on as you're talking about my WashU job, right?
Your WashU job,
yeah. So I was hired on as an academic physician track, and so what that means is you have an academic appointment in the university. And then you also are like an attending physician at whatever center you're treating patients at. And for us, we're actually credentialed at like a large number of centers because our network is large, and it's kind of it's decentralized, and we kind of go to all of them if we need to coverage and things like that. So I was hired on as that. It's basically a base salary with a bonus based on production. And what's actually quite different is that for for the one I had, it wasn't in there. Like there's not a I mean, it's in there a little, but there's not like a very you know, wordy written out like explanation of how that's structured, other than like here's the base, and then here's like, you know, there will be a production bonus. My new one, I guess we can talk about the differences, but something that's very different that I actually liked was there, it like in the letter, there's actually like a grid that shows like your like, you know, your gross pay compare like for each RVU level. So you know exactly, you know, what that's going to be. It's funny though, because I was thinking how when I came out of residency, I don't know what 9,000 RVUs like feels like, you know, like I don't know what that actually means. So that wouldn't have been as helpful. But now, just after having 4 years of getting reports twice a year of how many RVUs I'm hitting, and I've had, you know, pretty wildly variable volumes over the 4 years, I kind of know what those feel like. So it made me more confident that like the pay that I would get for the level of work, you know, was, you know, like I kind of knew what it was going to be, if that makes sense, because I kind of know what that felt like for my day-to-day practice.
No, I guess, and that I think is a really super important point, and I don't know how many residents really truly understand that, and I honestly don't even know how many of us still truly understand that, because you know the concept of an RVU and an RVU target really varies based on the type of patients you see and treatments you do. So you know right now, and as far as I'm generally aware, stereotactic radiosurgery, the SRS stuff, really generates a lot of RVUs. And so if you have one physician who's seeing 100 patients and they're like breast, and you're treating them with 3D, and then you have another physician who's seeing 100 patients and they're all SRS patients, you know, the RVU difference there is going to be massive.
Right.
And I think that, so, you know, for you then, kind of over the years, did your patient mix and treatments change, or were you kind of like, how did that work for you over the years at WashU?
Yeah, they kind of did a little bit. I think that uh, I started as the chief of sarcoma, and it was a kind of a slow ramp up, because before I came, it was a mix of people that were treating sarcoma, and you know, just to be totally honest, like some of them were like not super eager to let go of it, right? And
Well, sure,
so,
yeah.
and I think that's actually a really important point, because I think to some extent that probably happens in every practice. Like it's, you know, people need to be like more honest, I think, about that financial incentives are very strong in subtle ways. And you know, it's not like the stuff we talk about where you like put someone on protons to make money. I mean, maybe someone does that, but that's not, I don't think most people act that way.
Yeah.
It's more like just subtle stuff, just like, you know, like if some surgeon that doesn't refer for sarcoma all that much sends them to the person they used to send them to, even though I'm now there, like that person would just accept them and treat them instead of send them to me, like that kind of a thing. And so that part was a little frustrating in the first couple of months, because and I was trying to like tweet this a little bit the other day, but I had like this anxiety about being busy enough, right? And it wasn't even financially driven, because I didn't understand yet how busy I had to be to like make a bonus. So it was more like I left residency with this like message that you have to be carrying like 15 or 20 patients, or otherwise you're like not doing enough.
Yes.
And,
Yeah.
and in hindsight, that's such a weird message, because it's just, I don't see how you can even apply that across practices. It's just like a weird, or disease sites, right? It's just a really weird thing.
I totally, I think it's shorthand. It's easy to say, it's easy to communicate. So we just lazily sort of say that, but I totally agree.
Yeah. And I think about like, sorry, I walked away from the mic for a minute. I think about like how everyone that's ever said that to me is like someone that's in like a leadership role in an academic practice. And I was like, do you just want like all your people like treating a bunch of people? Is that, like,
Right.
is that why
Yeah.
you say that to people? It's kind of
That's kind of, you know, and that I'm definitely guilty of it as well, where it's just, there's no easy way to shorthand communicate, you know, workload. And even then, like if somebody tells me they have 20 on beam, you know, I have a general sense. But again, if it's 20 on beam of SRS gamma knife, and you're always paired with a neurosurgeon, versus 20 on beam and it's all head and necks VMAT, and you're, that's very different. But we all just kind of hand wave, oh, it's 20 on beam, it's 20 on beam.
Yeah. So to kind of answer your question more, because there's actually, I learned a lot in the second. So like after I was there for about 6 months, I got more settled. Sarcoma stuff kind of worked itself out. And then we had someone leave just for a new job. And I took over a very busy satellite lung practice that was also growing. So that like doubled the number of people I was treating. I got super, super busy. I was there like 2 days a week, and I probably had 10 consults across 2 days, and then like a whole bunch of other sarcoma ones at the other site. And so my second year there like was the year that I was like clinically super busy. And it was a mix of sarcoma, which it's not this way anymore, but it used to be a lot of people getting 25 fractions IMRT, and then or 30 fractions IMRT, and then the lung was like a mix of people getting 30 fractions and like SBRT, right? So that year, I would admit that I was too busy, like that more than I like to be. Because you have to remember that in academic practice, like you're also doing a lot of academic stuff, which becomes very, that grows and becomes pretty time consuming. And so that second year, I made a really nice bonus, but at the end of it, I was like, this is definitely not worth it. Cause I felt like I was burned out and working all the time, and it like wasn't a good thing to try to do. So that was a big message to me, because what happened then is in my third year, that was when I got that medical director role, and that came with a little base salary bump. And that was the first time that I was like, oh, if I can add base salary, then I can like work a little less and make the same money, and it would be better. And it is true. I think that it's probably always true that you can, if you trade the clinical work required to get the same revenue for some kind of a salary bump you get for like a leadership position, it's probably like a little easier on you. I thought it was for me. Like, a little admin work is easier than treating like 10 more patients a week, right?
Yeah, I think everyone would agree with that one, or at least I hope. I don't know.
Yeah, and like I did a lot. I tried to build out service. We built up the prostate thing. We were looking at like ADT. We were doing all this stuff, so I was in meetings all the time and things like that. But like it still felt. I don't know, man. Like I just feel like patient care is incredibly stressful these days. With just like it's everything other than sitting with the patient, right? It's like all the other crap that goes on. So I think.
Oh yeah, the patients are the best part. I wish I could get to do more than 10% of my day with that part, but.
I know it's right. Part of me wants to just like sit with them all day in the rooms and like just blow everything else off.
Yeah, I've definitely done that. I definitely, I'm like, no, I'm just gonna sit in these rooms today. That's what we're doing today.
So it was kind of like a journey, and that I think that did bias the way that I view things now, because I find it very interesting that when I went out now, I'll admit that the like financial structure of the deal was a little less important than some other things that we could, I guess, talk about. But I was very much seeking a practice that had a good base salary, that where the culture of the practice was to like, not be doing 12,000 or 13,000 RVUs a year, more like 9 to 10, which to me felt like a good solid number where you're busy enough to stay good, but you're not like, you're still like, going home at night and hanging out with your family and like going out on the weekends. That's sort of like what I was looking for, so that's what my new job is basically. And I did talk with the residents about culture, because I think that that's a really important thing, right? There's like personalities that these practices have, I think.
Oh yeah. No, I think that's definitely true. And that's so, in general, for the academic jobs, I think what you just described for your job is in what I've usually heard for most, which is where there's a base salary and then there's a bonus structure. And for you, I guess 2 questions. One was, what was the length of each contract agreement? And then was there ever like a clawback component, meaning that if you didn't hit a target, was some of your base salary ever at risk?
No. And so, yeah, that's a great question and point. I would never, so personally, I would never take a job like that. Because I'm risk averse, and I would just worry that I'd always be worried I like need to treat enough. So that would have been, so we didn't have that. So something I really liked about my first job and about the same one now is that there's no floor. So like it's a guaranteed base, and even if you don't cover your cost, you still get the base. And then that's kind of how
I
it
think
works.
that's fortunately pretty uncommon. I can kind of only think of one major place that I'm aware of that does that. So I think the at-risk component, at least in academics, is pretty uncommon. But was your
Yeah.
contract like a 3-year length, a 5-year length, or?
No. Oh, so this is so there wasn't one. I don't know if am I like allowed to talk about this? Probably, right? I don't know.
That I mean, we can, before we release it, we can double check. But yeah,
Yeah, no, so like
keep it
they're
general. Keep it
actually,
general.
so it was a letter. It was, so like one thing that is true is it's a very it's a very fair contract. And what I mean by that is that it's a letter. So you actually don't sign anything. It's kind of just like I think I maybe signed the letter and sent it back, but there's no, like my current job, I had to like docu-sign a contract, like this was not that. Um, and one thing that is very favorable is some of the stuff that people talk about that's like restrictions. So like there's essentially no non-compete. Part of it is it's maybe a little less relevant because St. Louis is not a highly competitive market, and Siteman is a huge, like, probably has a giant share of the market. So there's only a couple of small practices that would be within the non-compete. But you could totally live in St. Louis or Western Illinois and like totally not worry about that. The other thing is there's no clause about giving leave or giving notice. And my new boss was like shocked about that.
I've never heard of that, actually.
Yeah. Like I think it's funny. I've heard a lot of opinions about this. I don't know if you feel like 90 days is like standard, but
In the industry, it is. And then my follow-up question is, do they have to give you notice? But continue.
Oh, you mean can they like fire me without cause or?
Without a time? So like in my contract, there is a timeline for leave in both directions.
Oh, okay.
So my contract has my contract basically has two ways to terminate it on either parties. So there is like a termination for cause at the employer level, but there's a termination without cause that both of us could enact. And there's if either I or my group, my employer, does a termination without cause, there's a clock on that.
You know what? I think so. The answer is no. For my first job, there was nothing on either end, which was interesting.
So they could terminate you without any warning, notice, or reason.
You know what? I can't say that because I don't.
Because we should check. Yeah, and obviously this is so this is like a to the bigger point of, these are sorts of things that no one tells you about.
Yeah,
or you even think about, like you're not even thinking, because like why would anyone ever think about that? But for me, it was very, so mine is longer than 90 days, which is unusual. But the one thing I liked about it was for both directions, and this is the only reason I basically. Like,
how long is it? Can you say?
So I think it is. I think it's at least 120 days.
Yeah. So I know somebody that has 6 months, which is crazy in my opinion.
That is crazy. So for me, because again, my experience was really biased by COVID, and I was starting my job search right when COVID hit. And so the fact that I'm going to keep things general, I guess, the fact that a very well-known institution pulled contracts of new grads right as COVID hit,
yes,
and that scared me to death, and so that had just happened. And to be very clear too, it wasn't just a RadOnc thing, because like my residency institution had multiple people in multiple specialties had contracts pulled because of COVID. And so that was very at the forefront of my mind. And so when I saw the no cause termination clause in my contract with the longer time period, I actually was comforted by that, because my biggest concern was, what if my contract was pulled at the end of residency when I hadn't even started? What was I going to do then? Because, the financial stuff was very difficult. And so when that 4-month window hit, and it was very clear, that I was not going to have my contract pulled, at least before they would have to pay me something, I was very comforted by that. So it works in both directions.
Yeah. That I hope like one day I mean, I'm not optimistic, but it makes me really, I don't know how it works. I guess I just don't know, but I felt like I heard about that too, and I wish that the institution that does that kind of thing would just like absorb the cost, because it's just like you don't do that to people.
I was very surprised too. I think we
Yeah,
all
like
know what we're talking about, and it's very surprising
yeah.
knowing that the amount of revenue that that institution generates. That was a surprising sort of event.
Yeah, and I do know that it's like, it's I I've one of the I tell you, one of the biggest lessons that I learned as being attending is to like give people the benefit of the doubt, because
Always, always,
there's
always.
always like so much of a story that like you just can't believe is even real, because
Yep.
so many things. But I do know that hospitals operate on thin margins, but that part, I just feel like that when you're like hanging someone out to dry like that, um,
Yeah, that was, and because there's a lot of rumors like that in medicine in general, and especially RadOnc, but I know that that one was real, and
yeah,
so for
yeah,
me, and that's it's very interesting. For me and my generation of those of us from the residency class of 2021, who witnessed all these things across all these specialties and heard all these things, and then were doing the job search in radiation oncology and stuff at that time. So I think it really colored my view of the market, and why I pay attention to specifically these things, which I don't know if anyone, this is the longest conversation I've ever had about a no cause termination clause in a contract. But
it's
yeah,
gonna be the most interesting podcast.
the most, yes, the driest of the dry. And so, and I think,
But what I should add, well, so I don't know for sure, but I can tell you for sure that there's not one on my end. Like you don't have to give notice, which is kind of crazy. And I actually know this for sure because during vaccine mandate time, somebody rage quit like with no notice. Not in our department, like a different in the institution, a different department. I actually didn't even know the person, but you obviously heard about this because it was very like,
oh,
doctors
sure.
don't rage quit their job. So it's kind of it's kind of like a crazy thing. I don't know about the other end, but I also have never heard of someone getting fired like that without cause.
So this is interesting because I personally know, you would assume that, of all the people with kind of really elaborate Byzantine bulletproof contracts, that large academic institutions would have it. But this is not the first time I've heard of, kind of no clock, on a no cause termination, because I also know established attendings who have left with no notice, without consequence, really, which is kind of surprising. Whereas I consider my contract otherwise to be very basic, but that is definitely in there.
Yeah. I mean,
So
as much as I feel like as much as I feel like this needs to be more of just a job, right? People need to like not make this their whole life. I do feel like it's not the kind of job where you really can do that. Like I personally felt, to a lot of my patients that I have a close relationship with a lot of patients. I did feel like I couldn't just like ghost them. That just seemed like, not, it's like beyond unprofessional. It was just like not a nice thing to do, like I
it
just
is,
so
yeah. I mean, that is an excellent point of, there's for us compared to other professions, this sort of longitudinal ethical responsibility, and how people view that. And I've heard in various kind of shades of this where people can justify their own act. We're never the bad guys in our own stories. So
right.
I've heard various justifications for various things, but I completely agree where you have theoretically a large panel of patients, and especially at an academic institution, someone like you with kind of more specialty care of really people who don't have a lot of places to turn to, and that's kind of the what should be the hallmark of academic institutions, of just kind of these really hyper specialists who can provide things that can't be done elsewhere, to just kind of abandon that. So I don't know, and I think, hopefully as, time goes on and we get away from COVID, people forget about these small aspects, but that's just, something else to kind of pay attention to. And so I think for, for RVUs, it's very interesting. So the MGMA, which is kind of the one of the industry standards for benchmarking workload for physicians, and compensation and compensation RVU ratio and blah blah blah. The most recent one I've seen, the average RVU, or the mean RVUs, for a full-time, attending physician, is about 10,000, give or take. So in your opinion, for 10,000 RVUs, knowing what you know now, do you feel like that's representative? Is that a lot? Is that a little? How do you feel about 10,000 RVUs?
Yeah, I think it's, yeah. I think You mean like just I think in my experience, it's probably average. I think that my new job will probably be a little less due to the culture of the practice.
That's
Um,
just to really make it ironic, given what we were just talking about, I'm trying to think of to easily translate how much 10,000 RVUs would
is
be, and that's got to
isn't
be
the
15
median
to
more like
20.
9, or are you just like
I'm
rounding?
ballpark. Yeah, it's like 9 to
Okay.
10 to me. Yeah, so I personally don't view that as a huge difference, but yeah, I think it's 9 to 10 or fluctuates, and I do think so. Assuming just a generalist mix where you're seeing kind of a little bit of everything, and you've got a mix of 3D and IMRT and SBRT and stuff. I do think that roughly translates probably to 15 or 20 patients. Now that's part of the issue with things like hypofrac and all that, where to get 15 to 20 patients on beam, you have to see a certain amount of consults every week. And
Yeah.
if those patients aren't on beam for very long, then you very quickly, are kind of losing that. Because, for our specialties, RVU is generated by number of fractions essentially.
Yeah.
And so if you're seeing 100 patients and treating them all with 5 fractions, your RVUs are going to look very different than if you're treating them with 25 or 30.
So here's the question I have about that, because if you're doing like an average of 15 to 20 fractions, which I've seen, like I know Todd's been tweeting about averages over time, so let's just
Yeah.
say 15 to 20 seems to be the ballpark of like what it used to be, and you go down to 5, but you're billing SBRT instead of like a mix of 3D and IMRT. Are you actually making less RVUs, or because
So
yeah.
yeah, I've tried to figure this out up front. I'm not quite sure because I'm not always sure what the calculus is in terms of getting kind of reimbursement and charges and things, translating that into an RVU, because and I don't think that you can kind of standardize that across all environments, because if you the easiest, quote unquote, I'm doing really big air quotes with the word easiest,
Mhm.
but if you pull up any now the price transparency thing, and you can get the Excel sheets of hospital price transparency, and you go and you look down at those CPT codes, and you can look at what an SBRT delivery standard charge is versus an IMRT versus like a 3D with MLCs, like a complex device charge. You can kind of see that. So for and I know this is talked about on the internet a couple times. So the question of right now, I think it's Evicor, they are denying 5 fraction SBRT for oligomets, but giving you 15 fraction IMRT. That's a very common thing that's happening right now. And I went back into my own standard charges, and it's interesting that the standard charge for SBRT is roughly almost exactly 3 times the amount of a delivery charge for IMRT. So in terms of standard charges, 15 fractions of IMRT is roughly equivalent to 5 fractions of SBRT. And so
Okay.
then, there's this whole question of bundling of what specific CPT codes are you allowed to charge specifically for versus what is bundled, which is a whole other 17-hour conversation. But then how that translates into RVUs, even if you're bundling it, I think if you're bundling it and you can't generate those CPTs, I do think that would affect your RVUs, and we're gonna have to check that at a future time. But
Yeah. And I
yeah.
think what's like so frustrating about this from the perspective of a job seeker is that it's not just that, right? Like, so what we're talking about is the number of RVUs that end up adding up to your, I guess, your floor. Hopefully, I guess, if you're in a job where if you don't meet it, you lose money, but then also going into a bonus range. And so people think about that because that's like what your pay is based on. But then there's this like like this measure of how busy you are, that like from the perspective of your boss when you're working, right? So and it used to be new starts. I don't know if they talk to you about this as a personal physician. I get a little bit of it, but I also see it from the medical director side where I'm talking about it for the center. But they used to kind of do new starts, and it seems like centers are starting to move to, or sorry, not new, I'm sorry about that, not new starts. They used to do patients on beam and like fractions delivered and that kind of stuff. It seems like now more and more there's a push to try to move towards like new starts, because they're trying to capture the fact that like the number of fractions is dropping, but doing 5 of a lung SBRT is not necessarily less work than 20 of a breast 3D. So
It's funny you bring that up because I do hear about that because I'm the one yelling about it at the top of my lungs at my hospital, and
that's
because it's really hard, and there's other things that I have coming down the pike about this in particular, but I completely agree. So locally, the our on beam budget number, we're behind because I hypofrac, and so that stuff was set in the days of in the long ago, 5 years ago, of just kind of conventional frac everything. And but if you run the new start numbers, we're actually higher. So we're 10 or 15% higher now in terms of just raw absolute patient numbers than we were 5 years ago. But our on beam budget number, we're behind on that just because that's set on an on beam target. And so I do think that really does need to be adjusted because I'm as busy as ever, and seeing as many new patients as has ever been seen, but we're below kind of what the budget on beam target is, and it's all nonsense essentially, where it's not based on
yes.
reality, but we're humans, we got to benchmark and measure, and we can't exist without these sort of metrics. Our minds melt. So
Well, and I just think it's like, the cynical person in me wants to think it's intentional, but because it allows them to game the numbers, right? Like, because the number of people that you're treating and like the work you're doing in the clinic that your boss talks to you about is like disconnected from like your pay and like how many RVUs you get at the end of the year or whatever, right?
Absolutely. Well, it's a growth mindset where
Oh yeah,
it's
yeah,
the target's never the same or less. The on beam target always goes up,
yeah,
which is
yeah.
just which is nonsense. But it
And
is just how it is.
right, and that part is, and then one thing that actually is layered over all of that with our system. Do you have any additional compensation for coverage of procedures like SBRT?
No, that's interesting. So in my group, we all just kind of catch each other. So no, not in my
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Which I would be totally cool with, by the way, because I think it's, I'm a big fan of like everyone's a team and you like help each other do your stuff. We have a cool system where we have a batting order rotation that covers SBRT for like the center. And this is actually true at like every center. And then so to like kind of to compensate people for the additional work of covering like other doctors SBRT on a specific day, there's like you get like a little pay for that. It's not a lot at all, but it's like you do get additional for that.
And yeah, I've heard variations of that, but I think that's a good. People respond to incentives.
Oh yeah, yeah, and it's like, it's so low that from the center's perspective, it's super cheap, and then and then it just like really motivates people to cover, and it makes it faster, and it's I think it's really good. The other thing that make it is like has been so crazy is so do you guys do adaptive, like on table
Well,
adaptive?
oh, sorry, I was gonna say I have the adaptive 3D printer, but no, not on the table adaptive. No.
Yeah, so the new like on table adaptive treatments like that. So we're gonna do an adaptive show. I guess I can tease it. I'll take the opportunity away from someone. We're gonna do an adaptive show, and I'm gonna ask them about this because my understanding is they're building a new plan every day. Is that
so? I guess what platform do you guys use for adaptive?
Oh, we have like everything. That's honestly the coolest part about WashU by far is they have like we have both ViewRay and Halcyon Ethos.
So yeah, because we're kind of thinking about replacing our old machine, and one of our staff is really pushing for a Halcyon and adaptive, and I'm just really, there's other limitations in my opinion on the Halcyon. So
it's
but
funny.
that is a big draw. No, like that is what I've heard, which does change the calculus in terms of getting that machine.
This is probably really ignorant for me to say because I don't know, but it seems to me like if you're a community practice or even a big practice that doesn't have any kind of adaptive service line yet, the Halcyon's compelling to me because I don't know that like the best way to run an adaptive service is really figured out yet. And what's cool about the Halcyon is that it can treat a ton of patients like bread and butter stuff really well and very quickly. When COVID hit, we actually collapsed some machines down to like spread people out geographically in the main center clinic, and the Halcyon took on a huge number of patients because it delivers plans so quickly that you can make the time slots really short. And so I feel like if you're not sure what you're going to do with adaptive, like at the very least, you can have like a workhorse machine that can treat a ton of head, neck, and breast and stuff like that. That seems
This is a whole, I gotta, I'll do a whole other thing with one of my physicists, because that is kind of does describe the hospital I chiefly staff, or where we have two Linacs. One of them is just a bread and butter True Beam, and the other one is an old 21EX, and we're talking about replacing the 21EX. And there's a lot of appeal to the Halcyon in particular, because of what you just mentioned. But to me, some of the drawbacks would be, as far as I am aware, it can't do electrons, and it does not have a 6 degree of freedom couch. And those are pretty big limitations in terms of kind of, because the issue I have right now.
Oh,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
We'll finish that thought, and then we'll.
So because the issue what I have right now in a community center with just two sort of Linacs is that the 21EX can't do VMAT, whereas the TrueBeam can, and so I usually prefer VMAT for my definitive cases. If the TrueBeam goes down, which obviously is fortunately not that common, but if the TrueBeam goes down, that's it. There's no redundancy, so those patients are canceled for the day. So my preference in this moment, and has been, is just to have two completely matched TrueBeams for redundancy as a community center with two Linacs. Whereas there is a lot of draw to the Halcyon, but then I'm kind of stuck in the same thing, especially with a Halcyon, where if you put somebody on there and you kind of need that system, then if the Halcyon goes down, then you've no redundancy built in. So that's just a kind of a smaller thing consideration.
It's sort of like I keep telling my wife that I want an electric car, but it can't be our only car.
Exactly. It's exactly that.
So no, it's like, but what's so I would honestly, if I had two vaults, I would, like, a True Beam and a Halcyon would be like really cool. And again, like I hope somebody hears this and argues and gives good arguments against this, because I genuinely don't know. This is just like a guess. But what's nice about it is, like I said, it's fast, so it can treat a ton of patients, and people complain that like it's CT based. So like, they're like, well, the MR adaptive is better for the abdomen. And that is true. But my sense is that it's only a matter of time until the CT adaptive on Ethos is like almost as good or as good. And you can do so many things with it. And, I can't, I guess, talk in specifics, but I do think that there's a motivation to make it a very versatile machine that can do lots of things for a clinic, including adaptive. The MR platform seems to me like it only does adaptive, and it almost seems like there's a little bit of a struggle to find indications for it.
Well, I think, lost in this conversation, and Varian is a smart company, so I assume they're just kind of being tight-lipped about it. But the Halcyon, it's two separate things. So there's the technology behind the adaptive therapy, and then there's the machine it's tied to. So the downside for me is the fact that it's in a Tomo. If they could put the adaptive, the Halcyon kind of system in a True Beam, then it's not even a question. Like, and because the Tomo machine that the adaptive kind of software is built in was not meant to be what it is, at least as far as I've heard. It was kind of because his Halcyon is the software, or is it Halcyon Ethos? Which one is which?
Oh, Halcyon. Well, so again, like, I'm sure someone will no one's written in yet to like correct anything. I don't know if this is right, but the Halcyon is the hardware, like the machine, and the Ethos is like the software platform.
That's what I thought too. So what I want, and I know people who have asked Varian and they won't give us an answer. Like, why? I just want the adaptive platform put in a True Beam, and they haven't done it yet. And I've kind of heard mixed things about Varian being very smart. Like, I'm sure that's going to happen at some point, but I assume it's going to be after they've saturated the market with the Tomo kind of version of it. But for me, if you could put adaptive in a True Beam, I would push so hard to get that like tomorrow.
That's interesting. The imaging is not nearly as good on the True Beam
compared to it's specifically just the limitations of a Tomo therapy unit. Nothing beyond that. And then for me, so it's because nobody has really an accurate sort of measure about numbers of practices and types of practices and whatnot. So for someone in my position, staffing a community hospital, 2 linear accelerators, trying to make this decision about, okay, we already have a True Beam, we need to replace the older one, what are we going to get? those are sort of my considerations at a community
Yeah.
center, like redundancy and things. And your point about electric cars is essentially that. Whereas if you're a giant academic institution and you can, like UTSW just has their adaptive like center where all they did was just plug in a bunch, which is incredible. But so if you have that kind of capital and resources and patient population, then these conversations are one thing. But I think lost in the mix is just why are we tied to this software being available only in a tomotherapy unit, and is that the most sort of economic choice for a community center? But
that's that center makes me feel like they know something that everyone else doesn't.
I mean, it's well, if you're building a new plan every day, then I totally agree.
It's very
but
large.
It's very well. It's like, because when I was texting you the other day, where I was asking you to do 30 and 10 palliative protons, my concern is like the people who have access to these amazing things first. Abuse is way too strong a word, but find these loopholes. And kind of use them to the fullest extent until CMS or somebody cracks down. And then by the time it finally trickles down to the rest of us, it's like why we're still stuck doing 3D for breasts is just because of things that were done before the rest of us could adopt it. And so
this, by the way, this totally goes to what I said before, because it is not the doctor. Like, I mean, they do it, but I even saw this as a resident, like the places invest money in these machines and they want you to put people on them, right? So I've seen this, I'm pretty sure this happens to everyone, so it's like not a secret, but I think that there's pressure to put people on machines. And I think so like I think when people do that, it's like, what do you do? You're not going to tell your boss like no, right? Like you have to listen to them. So I think that that's where those loopholes come from, just to defend the doctors a little bit. I think.
I mean, I would defend the doctors, obviously, because I am one. Like it's silly, but yeah, I mean, it's we have so little control in just these conglomerates, especially in these academic medical center giants. Like you are just a small piece of it. You carry all the liability, but none of
the chairs don't even have control. It's above them, right?
No, it is.
Yeah. So but the thing I wanted to say is like, so for the I don't get so I guess I have not felt limited by, I guess, what you're calling a tomo. I didn't realize that was like a term to describe a style of machine. I thought it was like the brand.
No, tomotherapy is different than a linear accelerator. Well, I mean, there's a tomotherapy unit. It's like a spiral CT. Yeah. So the way a tomotherapy unit delivers radiation is different than a regular quote unquote linear accelerator.
Subtly. I mean, not.
Subtle, yeah. Well, it's now I'm way too far out from physics boards to kind of explain. As I recall, the difference is the patient moves through the unit instead of the arm rotating around the patient.
Right. But so that's a subtle, it's not like how electrons is different from.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Like protons. But I would say that, and so my just to be, I guess, explicit, your concern about that is that just its limitations and how it can plan, and like the types of plans that it can make really well.
Yeah, it's
because you don't get couch kicks.
Because you don't get couch kicks, but interestingly, given the conversations we've had about patients recently, for me in my environment, I have a high skin volume, and I use electrons a lot. And so it does depend on your patient mix, where if you don't, and now where I did residency, so Yale at the main campus at least had an orthovoltage machine and used it a lot. The electron feature of the linear accelerators is not as commonly used just because we had an orthovoltage. So why wouldn't you? So if you've got an orthovoltage or you're doing a brachy for skin, like that's one thing. But, for me, we use a lot of electrons. So that component of a linear accelerator is important for my local patient population.
So right. That's kind of why I feel like it can't be your only one. But just to comment on, we do lattice on Halcyon, which is like, and lattice is generally 2 full coplanar arcs and then 2 couch kicked arcs. Like when we do it on TrueBeam, that's what it is for like most patients, unless they're like super lateral, they'll do half arcs and stuff like that. But generally it's those 4 arcs. And so when we started like doing lattice on Halcyon and also ViewRay, I was like, these plans are going to be crappy. And they actually, they were crappy like for a couple of days, and then they were awesome. So the
Interesting.
physicists can, like, they seem to be able to, that may just be like a privilege that I get with the strong WashU physics, but if they showed me a halcyon versus a true beam plan, like blinded, I probably would not be able to tell the difference. The
Well, and
only
that's,
one, the
I'm
only one
curious
I
what your
would have,
experience would be.
the only one I would have been the old school cobalt view ray. You could tell with that. But
An actual Cobalt machine, or is that the brand name?
no, the first view ray was a cobalt machine.
Oh, I
Was
did
it?
not know that.
Isn't it?
I've never, maybe.
I'm almost, it is. I'm pretty sure.
You should. Yeah. This is not technology that I've had access to, so I don't know.
It was like the first model. Yeah. If you,
Oh, that's super cool.
They have like investor FAQs. V-Ray's cobalt-based radiation technology is a breakthrough. It's crazy.
I mean, that logically tracks given kind of the limitations, but you can never tell anymore. Like when somebody says cobalt, my mind immediately goes to that's a brand name. That's
no. So this is but that's the old one. So like that one's actually gone. So we don't have that anymore. The one we have now is the like the Linac V-Ray.
That's super interesting.
Yeah. So that one you could tell. It's subtle, but like you could definitely tell. And then the new one. Again, I mean, like one time they gave me a V-Ray plan, and I went to my James, like the physicist at his lattice, and I was like, this is a crap plan. And he showed me like objectively with his quality metrics that it was the same as the true beam one. I just, like, it was totally biased. I thought it was, I knew it came from the V-Ray, so I was like, this is crap.
That's so this is really interesting, because I know both of our ADD kicked in and we went off on a tangent, but because in terms of job evaluation, I never understood. That is ostensibly what we came here to talk about. So, because for me, and I don't know if you got this piece of advice, a common piece of advice I got was make sure you know all of the machines of your residency institution, and be prepared to talk about it. And that was just kind of passed down, and I didn't quite understand it deeply until kind of where I am now, and exactly what this conversation is where it went, where in terms of where you go for a job, the technology is incredibly. That's an upside and downside to our job, is that what we can or cannot do is explicitly tied to the machines we have or don't have. Thanks for listening. Find us on Twitter at Dr. Bekta, or at www.bektamd.com, or a million other ways to find us, because we're all over the internet. But this has been Out of the Basement. I'm Dr. Jason Bekta, and we'll see you next time.